Just before we get into this video, guys, as always, my aim for the end of the year is to hit 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already and you do enjoy the content, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because otherwise I'll do the Thanos click and just be like, muha, then no one else gets subscribed. I don't know where I was going with that. So today I'm going to be carrying on with my ranking of Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you watched the previous part, then you'll know that we have 6 movies left. Checking the list, yes, it is 6. And these will be the top 6, in my opinion, of the latest, well, not latest, but the last complete phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which of course wraps up the whole Infinity Saga. So let's not piss about, let's get straight into it. And I'm going to start off with Spider-Man Far From Home. Now the thing is, all the complaints that I said against Spider-Man and the way that he's portrayed in the MCU in the previous video when I was talking about Homecoming, all of those things are still applicable with this film. However, at the same time, given the events of Avengers Endgame, naturally with this movie sort of serving as an epilogue to the entire thing, there's no way they couldn't address this Tony Stark thing. So whilst I'm still like, I really wish Peter Parker wasn't a mini Iron Man, I do understand why they've done it, because they'd already set it up previously, so it is what it is. But I think the reason why I'll put this one where it is because I genuinely really enjoyed this film as a film. I think the suit in this film is absolutely incredible as well. Probably my favourite, and that is also due in part to the fact that when I played through the Spider-Man game for PlayStation 4, this was the suit that I used the entire time. So I do have a bit of a soft spot for it. But the main reason that isn't just an aesthetic thing is because of Mysterio, plain and simply. Like, in terms of Spider-Man villains, Mysterio has always been one of my favourites, and I often wondered how would they actually do Mysterio on the big screen, because when you think about it, as a character, Mysterio's actually quite goofy. But in this film, they did something that I didn't even think they would do, which is go even deeper with the whole smoke and mirrors bullshit and literally make it bullshit. I really like Jake Gyllenhaal in this film as well. I think he brings a level of charm and charisma, and I think so far, I mean, it's 2 for 2, I think Spider-Man has got some of the strongest villains in the MCU thus far. In terms of like individual heroes, with the Avengers it's slightly different. I'm also not in love with the fact that this movie travels around the world, similar to how I didn't like in Homecoming that a lot of it is in like Washington and other places, but because for me Spider-Man is very much New York. That's where I think of Spider-Man. But then again, it was a different change of pace, and it is interesting seeing Spider-Man in London and in Prague and all these different places. I like the fact that even though in the last film it felt like, oh, Spider-Man can do this by himself, he doesn't need the Stark gadgets and tech. They do go back to that a little bit in this film, but I think maybe it's more of a sort of comfort blanket for Peter Parker, and then at the very end he's sort of just like, no, I'm Spider-Man now, this is who I am. So even though they did repeat that, and I don't feel they needed to, I can appreciate the execution this time. Next up, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now here's the thing, with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, I mean the first one is great, don't get me wrong, but I really thought this one was a step up, and I don't know the general consensus on it. I don't know if other people agree with that, but for me, yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and enjoyed it a lot more than the first one, which I really did like a lot. I think for me, part of the reason why I like this one as much as I do is because of the personal aspect when it comes to Star-Lord and obviously dealing with his father. The whole thing with Ego the Living Planet and that reveal of what actually happened with Star-Lord's mother was such a jaw-dropping twist that I genuinely did not see coming. And that moment where he just flips his shit and loses it, like, I thought was a really strong part of the film. And also one of the most raw out of most of the Marvel films up to this point. Like, it really felt like a gut punch, and you really felt his emotions in that scene. Plus you get the addition of Mantis in this film, who initially when I saw the first few trailers I was like, I really don't know what to think about this character, but having watched the film and obviously subsequent appearances in the Avengers movies, I actually thought she was a breath of fresh air. She's a really nice addition to the Guardians and balances out the rest of the team quite well. I mean, Baby Groot is adorable. I think Rocket is really good in this film as well. I like the character development for Nebula as well. I thought she was a really strong part of the film. Like all of the cast and the main characters, I just thought all of them grew as characters. And when it's an ensemble cast, sometimes that can be hard to do because maybe one or two people will get left out, but I didn't get that in this film. I thought there was some really cool action, some really beautiful looking shots as well. And also, this movie has a heart to it that I really enjoyed. It wasn't just from Peter Quill's aspect either. It came from all over the place, and I did appreciate that. It made it such a all-round film, and again, soundtrack is fantastic. Thor Ragnarok. Now, I think I said this when I was talking about the previous Thor films in my Phase 1 and Phase 2 review. Up to this point, I could not give a fuck about Thor. I thought as a character, like his powers and stuff and his backstory, like his powers fine, backstory, whatever. And I thought Thor the Dark World are two of the most dull films in the MCU. Ragnarok, however, strips Thor back and then keeps stripping him back to the point where he has to just rely on himself. Now, I think the humour in places is a bit distracting and a bit too over the top and a bit too much of a dramatic tonal shift. However, I do appreciate it at the same time because it gave us another dimension to the character of Thor. And this version of Thor, I think, is the best one thus far because he really understands what sort of person and what sort of hero that he is or wants to be or needs to be. Whereas in the other films, his arrogance, I feel, got in the way a little bit too much. And yes, he's still arrogant in this film and he is in subsequent films, but I feel like because he is hit the hardest in this film, he has to be humbled a little bit. You know, no hammer, even cuts his hair off, like he loses his dad, he loses Asgard, he loses every fucking thing in this film, and it really breaks him. And that will obviously play later on into the two Avengers films that follow, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I really like the dynamic with him and Hulk as well. And I think it was great that Hulk isn't just like an Avengers character. I really like the fact that he appears significantly in somebody else's film. We knew because of studio rights that we weren't going to get a solo Hulk film again. And I don't think we needed one. I think everything that we've got with the Hulk essentially is a movie in itself. But it's really interesting to see how these two characters, who you could argue either one is the strongest Avenger. I mean, I would personally say it's Thor, but you know, you could make a case for either one. I like seeing those two clash on that, and their fight sequence as well I think is really awesome. And when Thor gets all the lightning powers, that just looks fucking awesome. I think Hela is a really cool villain as well. And obviously we also get a cameo from Doctor Strange, which I thought was a very witty scene as well. I wouldn't say this is the deepest MCU film. It definitely has potential to be, given some of the things that happen in the film, but I think this is one of the easiest watches. Like, you can just throw this on irrespective of what mood you're in, because this movie, it will make you laugh and it looks great. It's got some awesome action. Like, it's again similar to what I was saying about Guardians, it's a bit of an all-rounder. So here we go. Only got 3 films left. Third place, Civil War. Thing is, I really didn't know what to expect with Civil War because if you know the comic, which I do, I was just like, I don't know how they're gonna do this in the MCU, because the story of Civil War is very much driven by the whole superhero mask revealing identities thing. Obviously Spiderman plays a massive part in that, and of course he is in this film. He makes his debut in this film. The way that they handled it, and they made the Sokovia Accords, and they were holding the Avengers accountable for things that they've done, whether that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, that's kind of the point. What I like about this film as well is you do get that balance, and I do have to say, early on in the film, I am pretty much team Steve Rogers. I'm like, yeah, no, Captain America, you are absolutely right there. I 100% agree with you. Like, I understand where Tony Stark is coming from, but that doesn't seem like the right thing to do. And like the point that Steve makes where he's like, what if we need to be somewhere, but they won't let us go? And as soon as you give politicians this power, they can use it to their advantage. I'm like, yeah, Steve, I'm on board. But then when you get later on where Tony Stark learns the truth about how his parents died, seeing his reaction and the Winter Soldier and all that sort of stuff, then I'm team Iron Man. And I like the fact that this film can do that. It isn't a straightforward case of you agree with this one character, that's it. I do like that balance, like I say. This film was awesome as well because it does feel like a mini Avengers film. I mean, it could potentially be an Avengers film, let's be honest. Again, there's some really awesome action sequences in this film, particularly the airport sequence and the fight at the end where it's Iron Man, Winter Soldier and Captain America. I do think Zemo as a villain is a little bit lacking. To be fair, I feel like his plan is overly convoluted. Like, there's quite a few convenient things that need to happen for his plan to work, but at the same time, he's not this massive threat. He's just a guy who is damaged from what the Avengers have done in the past, and he wants his revenge. So, in terms of that, I do like his motives. I just feel like, I say, his plan is a bit all over the place and doesn't quite make sense if you actually think about it. But still, I mean, seeing all your favourite heroes just punching the shit out of each other, awesome. This is the debut for Spider-Man and of course Black Panther as well, who I actually thought stole the movie in places. I really like Black Panther in this film. I've got to say, in this film as well, I think this is some of the best performances from Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans in their respective roles. I really think that both of them nailed it with their characters. And then there were two. So obviously it's the two Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame, but the question is, in which order have I put them? Second place, Endgame. Thing is, I've heard so many different things about this movie from various different people, like this is the best movie ever, this is a wanky fan servicey mess of a movie and all that sort of stuff and everything in between. But the thing is, I don't mind that this is fan service because this is what everything was leading up to. With a movie like this, you have every right to be. It's like a season finale in a TV show, and the fact that it delivers on everything it's built up to, I'd take that all day. The major issue that I have with Endgame is I think the time travel stuff is a little bit convoluted, but I'm okay with it. However, the biggest thing for me is the fact that they're fighting against a Thanos that they don't know, that hasn't done all the stuff that they've seen him do yet. I mean, you had to sort of do something like that, I guess, but I don't know, in terms of the villain, I feel like Thanos was incredible in Infinity War, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but this version of Thanos doesn't quite feel the same. And I don't know if that's because he is this younger version or this version who doesn't have that same personal connection with the Avengers at this point. Not to say that he's bad in this film, because I don't think that he is, but I just feel like the Infinity War version of Thanos is vastly superior. I think it's really fun as well with the time travel stuff. I like when they go to places that they've already been to. So like when they go to the Battle of New York from the first Avengers film as an example, I thought that was fucking awesome and really funny in places too, especially with Hulk seeing his younger self, who is this big angry brute, and he's like this smart scientist guy who's nothing like that anymore. I really like Thor in this film as well, and obviously I've got to talk about it. Iron Man dies. That was a fucking gut punch. I mean, I knew it was coming, but at the same time, he's the figurehead of the MCU, and to see that character die was a hard watch, I've got to say. But the one thing that I will say about Endgame is this movie made me cry when I saw it in the cinema, and the scene in particular that I'm talking about is of course the portal scene. People who've just watched the MCU and don't really know much more about Marvel as a whole, I think that scene will be impactful. But for someone like me who has grown up reading the comic books and watching the cartoons and playing the video games and all this sort of stuff, like, there was a point in time where, I mean, some people might not even remember this, but there was a time when superheroes didn't cross over with each other. Like when I was growing up, you had like the Spiderman movies with Tobey Maguire, you had the X-Men stuff, Fantastic Four came a little bit later, you had like Ghost Rider and Daredevil and all these different films, but they were always their own separate thing. Now I know that there's references to various different characters in those movies, like I'm pretty sure they referenced Doctor Strange in one of the Spider-Man films and stuff like that, but at that time it was just, yep, Spider-Man's here, X-Men are here, Daredevil's there, etc. And it just felt like a pipe dream, considering like in the comics they cross over with each other all the time. In the cartoons, like I remember vividly in the Spider-Man cartoon there'd be appearances from like Doctor Strange, Daredevil, Captain America. Seeing every single Avenger or every single MCU hero, minus the Defenders, don't know why they didn't get a call up, because you'd think some of them would have more use than some of the people who were actually there. But still, that scene, seeing them all together, it was like watching my childhood come to life. And like I say, going back to a kid in my mind where I was like, this will never happen, to actually see it happen was mind-blowing. And I wasn't crying because it made me sad or anything, I was just crying tears of joy, because it's like, I remember seeing shit like this in the comics, I remember seeing this in cartoons and in games, and now here it is on the big screen all these years later. Like, this is what we've been building to, and it's that epic music as well, which is just fantastic. And then the battle itself is what it is, it's fantastic too, but that whole Avengers Assemble moment just felt like the biggest payoff ever. However, as great as it is, I do prefer Infinity War. I think the reason being is because I think Infinity War as a film is a much better film. Now, that's not to say that Endgame or any of the others are total dog shit, because from what I've been saying, obviously they're not. But I think with Infinity War, that was a real surprise for me in a lot of ways. Like, the way that they dealt with Thanos, like, I know that originally Avengers 3 and 4 was like part 1 and 2, and then they changed it to obviously Infinity War and Endgame, so I didn't really realise that they were going to be connected. I probably should have done if they originally were going to be part 1 and part 2. That's on me, that. But still, at that time, I didn't realise, and when you get towards the end of the film and it's looking like, oh, Thanos is gonna win, and then it's like, oh no, here's Thor. Oh shit, no, Thanos still did win. What the fuck? Like, the ending to that film is just so hopeless, I think, where heroes start disappearing and random people start disappearing, and it's like, whoa, what the fuck has actually just happened here? But it isn't just that moment. I think Thanos, like I was saying before, really is the driver of this film. And for me, he is my favourite MCU villain, because Josh Brolin, man, like, he turned Thanos into exactly what I pictured Thanos would be. I mean, the one nitpick that I have is he never seems to wear his armour, which he's always wearing in the comics, more or less. So I think that was done to emphasise how powerful he actually feels with the Infinity Stones, which, I mean, if that's the case, you feel it. And the thing is, Thanos does some dark shit in this film. Like, he kills Loki, which, that's in the first 10 minutes. That was a fucking gut punch. The scene with Gamora as well, like, Jesus. Red Skull, of course, has a cameo as well, which just came out of fucking nowhere. Again, this has got a lot of fan service in it too, thinking about it. But I think everything about this film, where everything sort of feels hopeless after the events of Civil War, and then the Avengers come back together, and it looks like they're going to save the day, and then they don't. Like, what a roller coaster ride of a film. And the thing is, like, with hindsight, it's not so much now, but the moment when Thor arrives in Wakanda, I thought was the coolest shit ever when I first saw it. Like, the build up, and then the Avengers music plays, and then you see the Stormbreaker just fly fucking everywhere and just take out all these different things, and then it just zooms in and he catches it, and the music ramps up, and it's like, you're fucking Thor, and he's like, bring me Thanos. Oh, just fucking sick. What an awesome moment. But all throughout the film, there's some really good stuff, and it's nice seeing characters who haven't interacted with other characters yet, or not really, like Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy, etc. It's nice seeing them interact with the likes of Iron Man, Spiderman, and the Hulk. I think I wish Captain America's part was a bit bigger in this film, but then again, he has such a major part to play in Endgame that with hindsight, I can look over that. But apart from that, I think this is borderline a perfect film for an MCU film. I really have very little fault with it, and the stuff that I do have faults with, you could argue the nitpicks anyway. In the comments below though, guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree with my choices? Do you not? How would you order them? Whatever it is, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description, as always, so if you'd follow me on any of those things, I'd absolutely love you forever. But till next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.